The BRICS group has officially welcomed 5 new members. The founding members of the group have agreed to admit Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. The agreement was reached at the summit in South Africa in August. Scholars from the new member countries and experts have high expectations.
So the investment that's going to come from the BRICS countries are going to be to fuel our development here. And the second thing is we're located in the Horn of Africa, where Ethiopia is a gateway to the rest of the continent. So definitely BRICS will benefit Ethiopia very much, and Ethiopia will also reciprocate these benefits in a major way.
I see the concurrent accession of Iran and some Arab countries to BRICS as a positive opportunity, because Iran, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and other member countries have their own development plans. The participation of countries in regional blocs or organizations can be very positive.
This marked the second expansion of the group. Over 40 nations have expressed interest in joining BRICS, and over 20 have formally asked to be admitted. So for more on the expansion, joining us now is Einar Tangen, Senior Fellow at Taihe Institute. Thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure.
5 more countries have joined the BRICS family, hailing from the Middle East and Africa. How do you perceive the new BRICS members and their potential impact on the group?
Well, first, they'll have to figure out a new name. I think the B10, that sounds about right. Basically, they've doubled their membership, and they wanted to include Argentina. Obviously, there was a political change there, and the new government has withdrawn. And so that pushes South America out. But if you start looking at it, it is a highly representative of the global South. Obviously, Africa, the Middle East is very, very prominent in this. And it really starts to flesh out what has been, at least it started with 4, then 5, and now 10.
With over 40 nations expressing interest and 20 formally requesting an admission, what factors do you believe played a decisive role in the selection of these mentioned countries as new members?
Behind the scenes, there was some resistance by one member, India in particular, to new members. There's kind of an attitude of the glass is half empty or it's half full. I think 4 of the 5 thought the glass was half full, and they wanted to see BRICS kind of go forward as an entity, especially representing the global South. In some instances, people said, well, let's go slowly. India was kind of looking at this and said, we're going to dilute our power, because with 10 members, they only have 1/10 of the vote. 5, obviously, they're 20%. But I think at the last moment, India saw that there were advantages to having more members, and not only more members now, but in the future. The real power of BRICS Plus, or B10, as it expands, is this idea that it's representing those countries in particular that have not done well under the current geopolitical system. I shouldn't say current, the past geopolitical system, which was dominated by colonial powers. They were the victims of colonialization, and you can see that even today. You can see Burkina Faso and the Sahel parts of Africa, who's just said, look, why do we sell our uranium yellow cake for 80 cents euro and then have the French resell it for 200 euros? I mean, it just doesn't make sense. So there's this new awakening, and a lot of that is due to China. China has a different system. It's been very successful. It has shown countries that it is not about following China or any other country. It's really about developing your own idea and your own path for your country. And I think this is really what BRICS represents. There is no political agenda. Mm-hmm. The 5 countries aren't saying to anybody that you should follow this model, that you have to be this kind of political system or this kind of economic system. It really is, we are all different. We accept those differences, but we have common goals in terms of security, development, and respect.
I know Russia will take the rotating presidency of the BRICS countries in 2024. President Vladimir Putin emphasized the importance of cooperation in political and security, economic and financial, as well as cultural and humanitarian aspects. What specific initiatives or projects do you anticipate will be prioritized in these key areas during Russia's term as the rotating chair of BRICS?
Well, according to Putin's own words, it's really going to be around the financial side. He's felt very strongly since his speech in 2007 before the Munich Security Council that the West, dominated by the U.S., was in essence trying to control the world for its own purposes. And he made very clear that he wasn't happy with that. Since that time, we have seen that the U.S. has weaponized the SWIFT system, which is the interbank settlement system, the international interbank settlement system. And they said that they never would. There's also been, obviously seizures of foreign funds of countries that they don't appreciate, not going beyond Russia. So for Russia, the key element here is the economic side, trying to figure out a way to get away from the hegemony of the U.S. dollar. I don't even think Putin thinks that the dollar will go away, but he wants to have alternatives already between Russia and China and globally. I mean, Russia and China, everything's settled in local currencies, but globally last year, only 20% of all of the energy trades were settled in a currency outside of the U.S. dollar, and this is something that the U.S. is going to have to watch.
Could you please elaborate more on the future of this move? As Putin mentioned, the commitment to expanding interbank cooperation and increasing use of various currencies in mutual trade among BRICS members. How might these initiatives impact the financial system of BRICS countries?
Well, it is very huge. If you start looking at the world today, you look at developing countries, a lot of them took out dollar-denominated loans. And then when the U.S. Fed started raising rates, this has caused havoc. These countries had to raise their rates in order to protect their currency, to prevent outflows of money. That depressed their economies. It also meant that they, even though they did that, they couldn't keep up. So as a result, they were in a position where they had to pay more of their local currency for their U.S.-denominated loans. It was disastrous, and it still is a huge problem. So, this is the kind of thing where Putin says, look, we need alternatives to the U.S. dollar, not only in terms of trade funding, but also in terms of loans. And this is one of the areas where you're going to continue to see a lot of pressure, especially by Russia, as it seeks alternatives. Obviously, they're under sanctions from the United States that prevents them from using dollars. So they have to push for an alternative system. If this goes forward, this has an effect on the U.S. economy, which, to this date is still funding a massive, some say Ponzi scheme, but deficit, $33 trillion and growing this year alone. It was a $6.2 trillion budget, but $2 trillion of it, over just under 1/3, was financed through debt. So, the U.S. has this situation. So there are a number, a confluence of issues that are gathering, which are creating real problems for the U.S., but also quite a bit of change globally.
Einar, many believe the ongoing discourse on a global landscape shift is notable, marked by the increasing influence of global South nations. We know the BRICS nations representing over 40% of the world's population, but have relatively low influence in international organizations like the International Monetary Fund. How do you interpret this phenomenon, and what are your expectations regarding the collaborative efforts of the Global South, exemplified by the groups like BRICS?
Well, on one side, you have the U.S., and the U.S. has been very clear that it is not willing to open up the institutions, World Bank, IMF. You have Brazil, you have China, you have the BRICS. They all wanted a bigger say, and were willing to contribute money. I mean, they weren't saying, give us the the votes without necessary financial inclusion. They were willing to put money on the table, but they were denied. And so you have the growth of these alternative entities like BRICS, which is rapidly expanding, like RCEP, regionalization, which countries are embracing because the WTO has, in essence, been shut down by the United States, who refuses to allow any judges, appellate judges, to be seated at the WTO without an appellate body. There are none right now because the U.S. will not allow any appointments. So therefore, there can be no final decision. And this has just severely hampered the WTO. So the countries are looking for alternatives that make sense, that are sustainable, that are inclusive. They no longer want to be under hegemonic control by one country.
Einar, one last question. Earlier I mentioned Argentina is also part of the expansion, but the new president has announced that the country will not join the group of emerging economies. What do you make of the decision? How do you assess the impact of such decisions on Argentina's future economic plans?
Well, not good. I mean, at the same time as he's saying he was campaigning on the fact that he did not like China, didn't want to engage with China. The first thing he did after he got in office was he threw aside the chainsaws that he used to show up with at political rallies. He donned a suit and tie, and he asked China formally to renew a $6 billion currency swap agreement. China said, well, we want to know what's going on before we renew that. That has not been renewed. Argentina is in the same predicament it was before the election. A very weak economy. They have lots of natural resources. They should be, paradise on earth, but they're not. Now, he's made a lot of promises that he can fix everything and that it's very simple, that just a little bit of pain will result in a healthy economy. I don't know that that's necessarily going to come true. So the world will be watching to see what happens. But meanwhile, you have the B10, which is going forward, and you've had reports out showing very clearly that BRICS and that RCEP, that the Belt and Road Initiative, are showing concrete results for the countries that participate. So, in the end, it's not about words. It's about actions and results. And this is what is going to sway other countries in terms of their opinions about what is going on financially in the world today.